Great. Okay. So here we are, the best botanical photos 2021. We're going to start off with a quick quiz, and then we're going to have contributions from some excellent botanists, all long-standing members of the society. So we're going to have a presentation from George Hanson, a presentation from John Edgington, and a presentation from Anchor Marsh. So we're just going to start now, though, with the quiz. So we've got 15 plants I'm just going to give you a little bit of time to have a look at each one. Some of them should definitely be things that most beginners will probably know. If you're not sure what they are, just have a guess, and we'll just go through a little bit of time if you want to just jot down what you think each one is. Okay, so number one, just going to leave that on the screen for a few seconds. You can use English names or Latin names, it's entirely up to you. Okay, so then we're going to go on to number two. So hopefully at least some of these will be things that you'll have seen growing around commonly in London. Okay, number three. I always love to see that growing on old walls. Okay, then we're on to number four. Number five. Number six. We've got two things there to help you out. Okay, then we're on to number seven. Such a striking little plant. I always love to see that. Number eight. Number nine. And then number 10, you've got an artist illustration by Mary Walcott. Then we've got number 11. You can see the lovely downy stems. Then we go on to number 12. Number 13. When I was working in a school teaching young children, they always used to love this. The tiny little flowers, they kind of peer down at them. So it was one of our school favourites. Number 14. And then we have one more, last one, number 15. Okay, so great. So I hope you've managed to have a go at least some of those and jotted down your answers. And now we're now going to go through them. And if people want to, when we get to them, if people want to pop their answer in the chat, you can. And let me go see if I've got the chat. Okay, so Oh, okay. Yeah, your child like that. Your daughter likes that as well. Missy likes that as well. Okay, so number 1, okay, is bulbous buttercup, ranunculus bulbosus. Then we go on to, and you can see those nice sepals, the bent back sepals. Number 2, something that's really spreading everywhere these days, Plantago coronopus, buckshorn plantain. Number 3 on the wall, Asplenium trichomanes, maidenhair spleenwort with the black rachis. Number 4, Brisa media, the common quaking grass. Number 5, dogwood, Cornus sanguinea. And then number 6, you can see there with a bladder, where it gets its name, bladder senna, Colutea arborescens. Number 7, Euphorbia helioscopia, sun spurge. And then number 8, on the little balsam, small balsam, Impatiens parviflora. Then we've got Lathyrus nisolia, grass vetchling with that striking magenta colour. And then the illustration is of bogbean, Lenianthes trifoliata. Number 11, with that lovely downy stem, downy leaves, common fleabane, Pulicaria dysenterica. And then number 12 is yellow bristlegrass, Soteria pumila. 13, my children's favourite, Charadia arvensis, field madder. 14 is Rus tiflina, staghorn sumac. And then 15, Rhinanthus minor, the yellow rattle. So well done for taking part. And yeah, okay, no preparation. That's right, Andrew, just straight into it. But yeah, great. Okay, so yeah, definitely got some of those right. That's fantastic. If anybody wants to, if you want to tot up your scores, obviously the maximum you can get is 15. That's fine. If you want to pop into the chat how many you've got, that's fine too. So I hope you enjoyed that. That's just a little fun to get us started. And I'm going to hand over now to John Edgington. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Yeah, David said full screen. 13 is brilliant. That's really good. Yeah, that's fine. So 7 out of 15, that's half. So it's fantastic. So it's not competitive at all, just a bit of fun. But thank you everybody for taking part. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen now. And well done to everyone for joining in. And John, are you? Yeah, you started your video, and you've got your sound is on. So are you ready to start sharing your screen now?
Yes, I'm ready.
Okay. Yep. So you should be. That should be okay for now.
Let's see if I can do that. There we are.
Perfect. And then you've just want to start it as a slideshow, and then we're ready to go. Perfect.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is that all right now?
Yep. Yep. Perfect. Handing over to you now.
Right. Well, I've at the moment my screen is being obscured slightly by the pictures of me, which I don't want.
You can drag that little box around. So if you go onto your box.
Okay, there we go.
Where it's convenient.
Out of the way.
Perfect.
Right. Well, thank you very much, Maria. What I'm going to show you has no overlap at all with the plants that you've just shown, fortunately. So we'll have some different ones. I wasn't able to be at last year's Best Botanical Photos, so what I'm going to show tonight covers both years 2020 and 2021. As we know, they were years of considerable lockdown, and so most of the photos I'm going to show, in fact nearly all, were taken within walking distance of my home. And I should say my homes, because I've got another house that I sometimes go to in the summer in Scotland, and part of these photos, in fact half of them roughly, were taken in Scotland and half of them were taken in London. And I'm not a great photographer, so please excuse the quality of the photos. They're really selected because they are plants which in general are not so common, and in particular they're not so common in the places where I've seen them. So let me start off then with 5 plants which I saw in London, and here's the first one. The manager of the Royal Parks, Green Park and St James's Park, Mark Vasilevsky, is someone that I was talking to earlier on in 2021, and he said that some of his staff who were looking after the Royal Parks had reported some orchids in the Mall. So I thought I would go and have a look. Indeed, I found in the, which runs alongside Lancaster House and St James's Palace, walking towards Buckingham Palace, I found 6 or more of these pyramidal orchids, Anacamptis pyramidalis. And what was interesting is that the grassland that they're growing in is a very unusual sort of grassland to be found in central London these days. It's almost as though it's not been treated or dealt with, or certainly it hasn't been treated as an arable grassland ever since the time that Hyde Park and Green Park were, as they were at one time, were private residences of royalty. So it's intriguing to think how these orchids get here. Orchids get everywhere, but clearly the ground is very accommodating to them. So I started off then with Anacamptis. I should say that I had to decide what order to present these slides tonight. I decided the simplest thing was to present them in alphabetical order. So Anacamptis comes first. And after Anacamptis, in the Mall, is this. I was informed of this plant by Roy Vickery, who you may know, who was, he used to work in the Natural History Museum, and Roy now runs the South London Botanical Institute. And he had been wandering around Westminster, as you see, in December 2020, and outside the Queen Elizabeth II Conference Centre, which you can see on the right in this picture, almost opposite Westminster Abbey, is this granite wall running around a raised grassy area. And tucked in under the cornice of this granite wall are these ferns. Now, there are, I went at Roy's suggestion to go and have a look at these ferns because he thought that one of them would be rather interesting. And indeed it is. The photograph shows 2 of the ferns. There were a total of 7 different species of ferns tucked in under that cornice. And the one of real interest is Asplenium Obervaltum, Lanceolate Spleenwort. When you look at these pictures, or this picture, you might think that the ferns are Asplenium adiantum nigrum, black spleenwort, but that is a very triangular frond, and these lanceolate spleenworts have narrow fronds running all the way down without expanding much at the base. And the interesting thing about it is that it's not known in central London at all. It should be in Cornwall and West Wales. In fact, these plants are growing about 300 kilometres from their nearest natural habitat in Britain. How did they get there? I don't know. We have had another occurrence of the same plant in London about 10 years ago, where it grew on a wall near King's Cross, which has subsequently undergone a great deal of gentrification, and the wall has essentially disappeared, the plants with it. So it was rather delightful to find another occurrence of Lanceolate spleenwort in central London. It's still there, or rather it was still there about 3 days ago when I went to have a look, and I hope long may it continue. Now that's an unusual plant for central London. So is the next one. Near King's Cross, again, there's very little ground which can be called rough, untended ground. But there is one patch which is like that. It's about the only remaining patch left. And I was just checking, not thinking I'd find anything of interest there in November last, when I found, as you can see, what I'm sure you will recognize as yellowwort, Blackstonia perfoliata. Now, how did it get there? If you look at the map of the distribution of Blackstonia, which grows on calcareous grounds, particularly in the south part of London, Greater London, it should not be growing anywhere near central London. What's interesting is that not only was this one plant hanging on, as you can see, it should have been flowering in the summer, but in November it was still just about hanging on. My right-hand photo shows a few inches away, perhaps about 20 centimeters away, another small seedling plant of Blackstonia. Now, it is interesting that these plants are here. It's particularly interesting if you read Rodney Burton's Flora of London, where his statement on yellowwort is that it is impossible to germinate in cultivation. Well, I don't know whether these plants here have germinated in situ, or whether somehow or other the soil in which they are growing was transported to the site. It's a mystery to me, anyway, how this got here. And another mystery, I'm sorry if I'm giving you rather large numbers of mysteries. Chadwell Basin in East London in May 2020, I was looking at this. It was about the farthest I'd ventured from my house in this period of lockdown in 2020. In fact, I wasn't walking, I was cycling there. And I found this little plant here, and I realized that I had only ever seen this once before, and that was in East Anglia, growing on a sort of a bare, gravelly ground, which is what it was in the Chadwell Basin. This is part of the old dock, which has been allowed to become just a sandy, gravelly, bare piece of dirt with occasional flagstones in it, as you see on the right-hand side. And it is mossy stonecrop, Crassula Tilea, a plant which, again, is not uncommon in its normal preferred habitats, especially in East Anglia, but again, it doesn't seem to have been recorded in London. I suspect that climate change might have something to do with it. It's a plant which is, I believe, appearing more and more sporadically in other parts. It's probably therefore increasing, and we may hope to see it again. Its name, by the way, Crassula Tilea, I wondered why it was called Tilea, and I found out that Tilea is an old name for the genus of Crassula, stonecrop genus. So essentially it's called stonecrop. So that's the fourth of the London plants that I want to show you, and the fifth one, back to orchids, Regent's Park, June 2020, some spotted orchid, common spotted orchid, rise of fuchsiae growing. The photo shows that they're just close to the lake in Regent's Park. I have seen it there before. It's not unknown to grow in Regent's Park, but it's very sporadic. It doesn't appear every year. You can see from the photo on the left that there are maybe a dozen plants growing there. As I say, it has been recorded quite a number of times. And I'm glad to see that it's still there. It's obviously looked after by the garden staff. In fact, the photo on the left was taken after I'd got through a barrier erected to keep people away from taking photographs of it. Right, a couple photos next that I took in Scotland. Unlike some of these plants I've just shown, which are a bit uncommon in the place where they grow, the next one is very common. It's narrow buckler fern, Dryopteris carthusiana. Why have I taken a photograph of this? Well, I've taken a photo of this because it's being illuminated by the sun from behind. And it shows, I think, rather beautifully, the distinguishing enables you to separate this buckler fern from broad buckler fern, Dryopteris dilatata. That is that the scales on the stems are a lovely tan colour without any trace of a dark black spot in them, which Dryopteris dilatata has. And it shows up very nicely with the many, many scales running up these growing plants. It's still in its early stage of unfurling, even in June, and that's the best time to distinguish this from Dryopteris dilatata. Another Scottish plant, in this case it's not a plant you'll be familiar with, I don't think, unless you are in Scotland, is a plant in this particular case just underneath the little waterfall on the left-hand side. And the plant is shown here in big, enlarged view. It's a horsetail, Equisetum pratense, shade horsetail. I'm not quite sure why it's called shade horsetail, because it grows in the open air in this case, I put that in because it is the only horsetail, I think, which is not to be found in England. I'm now going to go back to London, to a place which is really quite close to where I live, Claremont Square in Islington. Claremont Square is a covered reservoir. It's got a fence all the way around it. The only access is to waterboard employees, and it was covered over in the 1850s. And since then, so far as I can tell, there's been very little management of it at all. Once or twice a year, the waterboard employees go in and they clear the lower herbaceous stuff, but they don't bother with the trees and shrubs which are growing. And this particular shrub interested me. It's a multi-stemmed shrub or small tree, and it's Frangula alnus. It's alder buckthorn. Now, alder buckthorn is a plant of peaty, damp areas, and is not uncommon in Britain. But why it was growing in some profusion on this covered reservoir, I don't know. There are, you can see one of the plants on the left-hand side of the left picture. There are about 8 or 10 large, clearly quite old plants of alder buckthorn growing on this grassy bank. There was one that I saw about 20 years ago in a nearby street, which I suspect now might have been a seedling from these. Now, I saw 20 years ago, it looks exactly the same now as it did 20 years ago. And I'm beginning to think that Alder buckthorn is actually a plant which likes central London, having seen it here. But I don't know why or when it arrived. As I say, there are a lot of plants there. Now we go back to Scotland for a few more plants. This is Petit Quinn, Genista Anglica, not an uncommon plant. What I thought was interesting about this photograph is that there's such a lot of it, because normally, certainly in the south, it tends to occur as scattered individuals and great quantity. But here on dry heath, it's growing well, it's doing very nicely. And although it is declining in the south, it's clearly not declining in Scotland. Now, when I'm in Scotland, I do a bit of hill walking. I didn't do much hill walking in the last couple of years, so I don't have much in the way of montane plants to show you. But I'll just show you one plant, which is rather nice. Three-flowered rush, Juncus triglumis. And you can see why it's called three-flowered, because it's got three fruits. The capsules that you see there are typical of Juncus triglumis. It normally has three, occasionally it will have four. It is not as uncommon as its near relative Juncus biglumis, which has only two flowers. Juncus triglumis is an attractive plant. This was taken at about 400 meters altitude. It's about the lowest altitude that this will grow at. Now, our next photo is the only one which is not taken in London or Scotland. Whoops. Sorry. What's happening there? Whoops. Let me go back a little. Sorry about that. Okay. I happened to be in Cheshire because I had been at a wedding in June 2021. And my wife and I decided that we would, at low tide, walk out to Hilbury Island, which is in the Dee estuary. It's only accessible at low tide. And I was delighted to see some sea lavender growing there. And here is the photograph of sea lavender growing on the beach there. Sea lavender Pneumonium is a tricky genus. I just checked back, and the old flora of Clapham, Tewton, and Warburg divided it into 8 species. The latest Clive Stace flora lists 16 species and a number of subspecies. And I understand that Sell and Morel, the large and expensive flora, now has 43 species. So this plant is Limonium britannicum, that's one of Stace's species, subspecies Celticum. And I don't say that because I have carefully examined it and can confirm that that's what it is. I say that because it is the only Limonium on Hilbury Island in the BSBI database, and it's named as Limonium britannicum subspecies Celticum there. So I'm relying on the database being correct, and this plant, which is like many of these subspecies and species of Limonium, is endemic to Britain. In fact, it's endemic to just a small stretch of coast on the northwest, from North Wales up to Westmoreland, including Cheshire here. My next photograph is back to Scotland, and it's of what I think is a really attractive plant. Not that common, Mayum Athamantikum. It's one of the carrot families. It's extremely odoriferous, very strongly scented, and in fact very attractively scented. You see it here growing on unimproved grassland beside a river, and it's not that common now. It is said that it has been removed by farmers because of strong flavour. But I think it's an extremely attractive, very feathery plant. I did wonder where this name Athamantikum came from. So I did a little bit of checking up. Apparently it was known, or a plant called Mayum Athamantikum was known to the Greeks, Dioscorides in particular. And it was named after Mount Athamos in Sicily. Well, this plant in front of you does not grow in Sicily, it was in Europe. And it's clear that the plant that was called Mayum Athamantikum in Greek is not the same as this particular plant. This plant here, you may know, has a couple of very peculiar vernacular names. One is Spignol, which apparently is derived from a German word. And the other is ball's money. And again, I was trying to work out where that came from. One source says that it's named after the Norse god Baldr, but who knows whether that's correct. A lot of this folk etymology is very dubious, I think. And finally, one more plant from Scotland. Holly fern is said to be a fern which is threatened, which is in fact endangered in many places. In England, it certainly is. My experience is that where I have found it in Scotland, it is really, well, it's not found everywhere, but where you do find it, it can be quite lush and quite abundant. When it's not being grazed, it is subject to grazing, so it will get a little bit lost because of that. But on the whole, it seems to be doing well in Scotland. It's a lovely plant to photograph. As you can see, it's a most attractive, great fronds of holly fern. Let me now come back to London for the plant. This is in Lincoln's Inn Fields. On the left-hand side, there's the railings around Lincoln's Inn Fields, and across the street from those railings, outside the street, is the John Soane Museum. But just inside the railings, there was a plant growing, and I thought, oh, I don't know what that is. And I took some photographs of it, and I suppose I should have known, but I certainly didn't. Someone explained to me what it was. It's Purslane, Portulaca oleracea, a plant which, again, I had not been aware is a pot herb, and it got very nice. Apparently, I didn't actually try it, but it's very nice as a salad plant. But what's it doing there? I don't know. I don't know how it arrived, or indeed where it came from. It does grow occasionally. It is said that it's sometimes a birdseed plant. It grows in southern Europe, and for reasons that I've never understood, it's called common purslane. It doesn't seem terribly common to me. I'm sure other people are much more familiar with it. And here's another plant which is now growing in a front area in Bloomsbury, a nice fern. And again, this is not a British fern. This is Pteris tremula, And curious thing about this is that this particular street in Bloomsbury hosted plants of this Pteris tremula at number 3, number 6, and number 11. And now they've all gone. It's once again an example of people finding that there are messy bits of foliage getting in their way and making the place untidy, and so we rip them out. I found in the past that this actually doesn't always work, and that they are quite prone to regrow again from their rhizomes, which have not been pulled out. So I hope that will happen here. We're going back to Scotland again for a pearlwort. Heath pearlwort. It's a lovely little plant, really beautiful, starry white blossoms, quite unlike the west pearlwort that we're commonly used to seeing. This grows in nice, beautiful little rosettes on rough, gravelly ground, again, heath, dry heath ground. And it can be distinguished from other pearlworts by the fact that its sepals are hairy, glandular hairy, as well as by the fact that, unlike many of the pearlworts, it always produces flowers with 5 petals. And what's next? Oh, yes. Now we're moving to something rather more rare even than that pearlwort. I did actually, this is a plant that is not within walking distance of my home in Scotland, but I thought I would include it because it's a rare and protected plant. It's Marsh saxifrage, Saxifraga Herculis. This photograph was taken in Aberdeenshire at one of its very few sites. It's a lovely plant, grows in damp grassland, as you can see on the left. At a distance, it looks just like buttercups, and buttercups do grow around it in the same area. The photo on the right, I'm not sure if you can see, I hope you can see that the petals have got lots and lots of little red spots on them. Reddish orange spots. It's not quite clear why they have those spots. I'm told that this plant is pollinated by bees, and it may be that and it also has quite strong nectar glands at the base of the petals. These little spots may be to guide the bees down to the nectar gland. I don't know. Anyway, it's a protected plant. There are a few sites of it in Scotland and 1 or 2 in England, but you have to travel quite a distance to see it. Another plant which is rather more common than that is in London, and it's another saxifrage, and this is rue-leaved saxifrage, Saxifraga tridactylitis. What I'm doing here is walking along the Thames path. There's a retaining wall with some bars on it, and on the top of the retaining wall, I'm looking down onto the top of the retaining wall. You can see, well, I won't say hundreds, but many, many, many dozens of young little rosettes of Saxifraga tridactylitis. Not into flower yet. This was early February last year. It's a plant which is spreading dramatically, it seems to me, in central London. Dougie Kent's Historical Flora of Middlesex remarked that it grows on the river wall of the Thames, which it is here, and he said then that it's very rare and decreasing. Well, that was in the 1970s, but by then it might have been decreasing, but now it's on the up and up, and rue-leaved saxifrage can be found all over central London now. Not so the next plant, which is Scleranthus annuus, annual knoll, again photographed in Scotland on gravelly, bare ground. It's a nice plant. quite distinctive, as you can see, with this very pale whitish coloration and a rather hard appearance. Scleranthus, meaning hard and horny. Its English name, annual Noel, well, it's hardly an English name, it's a German name. Noel it is a German word which apparently means coil of thread or something of that sort. Quite why it's given its name to this plant, I don't know. And another plant, we now go back once more back to London. And nearly there, this is plant. Again, a central London, Bloomsbury Square, well, at the beginning of last year and at the end of the previous year, there's a lot of what you can see growing here, plants of milk thistle, Silybum marianum. Now, again, a plant which is not uncommon outside the central London, but what's it doing in such great quantity in Bloomsbury Square? It's still there, in declined a little bit, but I'm rather puzzled as to why it should have appeared there. There's a number of grassy areas in the square. This is the only one which has these large number of milk thistles growing in it. And again, as to quote Dougie Kent's Historical Flora, he says it's very rare and it's often merely casual. Well, I suspect it's going to be casual here, probably won't survive, but it would be nice to know where it came from. And I'll now finish with the very last of my slides, again from Scotland in August last year. This is what's called least burrweed, Sparganium natans. Now you're probably used to Sparganium demersum, Sparganium immersum, the branched and the unbranched burrweeds. But this little fellow, it really is quite small, is really very attractive and easily distinguished from the other ones by subtleties such as, if you look at either the left or the right hand photo, you probably see that it's got a bract beneath the lowest flower, and that bract is very, very short. All the other burrweeds have bracts below their lowest flower, which are at least as long as the whole inflorescence. So this is not difficult to distinguish. But again, it's not that common. It's certainly not common in the south. In fact, I don't believe it's ever been seen in the London area. Now, is that all? Yes, that's all. So thank you very much, and I will now turn off and hand you back to Maria.
Hi everybody. Yeah, John, that's great. Thank you. Stop sharing your screen. Thank you ever so much for that. We did have a little bit of sort of dropping off the signal, going and coming again. There's nothing very much we can do about it, but I hope people enjoyed. That was fascinating photos, and I like the kind of contrast when we're moving from London to Scotland and back again. So it's really, really interesting. Thank you very much. We're going to go straight over to George now. So George, are you ready to start sharing your screen? Yeah.
Unmute myself.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, you can switch your video on as well. If you have problems with your bandwidth, the best thing to do is to switch your video off. But let's see how you go, because your signal may be better.
Okay, share screen.
Yeah, please.
Oh, how about that then? That's doesn't look right. Oh, there we are.
It's coming.
So back to the beginning.
It's looking good.
Right. Are we all fit? Can you hear me?
Yeah, yeah, that's fine. We can hear you, see you.
What?
Do you want to switch over to the slideshow view, because we've still got your
I'm in slideshow view. I'm at this end anyway.
Okay, do you just want to click it again, because we've still got you're not at the end of the world, but we've still got the view, and we've got the little pictures down the side.
Oh, hang on, let's
So
again then.
Just because that means.
I'm in slideshow view.
No, still not working this end. So yeah, so if you click
Okay,
on.
well, I'll carry on. I mean, you can see the pictures, can you?
We can, yeah, we can. So we can manage with this.
Let me just have another look. Yeah, no, it's
all right. Okay, carry on, George. Don't worry about it.
there.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, this is early crocus, Crocus Thomasinianus. These are arranged vaguely in chronological order, but not purely. Most of them are taken in Surrey. Early crocus, Crocus Thomasinianus, is one of the naturalized crocuses that self-seeds very freely. As you can see, this was last year actually, tons of it. And this is only a small part of the patch. However, you can tell it's Thomasinianus because the tube is usually lilac coloured and the tube is very pale. It self-seeds. Have you ever seen crocus seeds? Well, I haven't, but it clearly does self-seed. So I got some in a pot and I grew them. And last year I had to go and look at them every week. And in May, at the end of May, the 30th of May, this appeared on one of my plants. And in 2 days, it grew up and the capsule dehisced and the seeds were gone. I suspect the reason I've never seen it on the verge or anywhere else is because by the end of May, all the verges have been mown, or it's completely hidden in the turf, and they're only visible for a very short time. So I was pleased to actually have seen it at last. I had a look at
George, so I'm just going to pop in. Have you moved your slides on to the next from the initial slide? Because we're not seeing them moving forward.
Yes, I have.
No, we're still on the main, on that first screen.
Well, let me escape again. What I will do, I'll stop PowerPoint and start it again and see what happens.
I think that might be a good idea. And there's also a suggestion is when you get those little pictures down the side, it's from Caroline, there's a little X in the top corner.
Yeah.
So if you click that, yeah, then that's getting, okay. So now we can see Seba's crocus.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, that looks fine now. So let's carry on.
How bizarre. Okay. Can you see it now?
Yeah, we've basically got that. We've got that picture big enough for us to be able to see. Still that same picture though. We're not moved on at all. We're just looking at it, but it looks very lovely.
Why is that, I wonder? Anyway, so this was, I had a look at crocuses last spring, and this was in Send Churchyard. I didn't recognise it. I sent a photograph to Brian Matthew, who's a BSBI crocus referee. He's very helpful. He named it for me as Crocus seabrai, and it has the tube and the throat are yellow, and it's usually the wild sort is this sort of lilac colour. There's a cultivar got a CV tricolour where everything is much more exaggerated. Sorry, someone's calling me. I'm talking, I can't come up. Sorry about that, I've been called. Yes, so Brian Matthews is very helpful and explained why things are what they are. And I sent him a load more photographs a couple of weeks ago, and he was very helpful with those. We'll come to those. Right, because of the lockdown, all the golf courses were closed. So I took the opportunity to go to Woking Golf Course, which is just up the road from here, and which is superb botanically. This is one of the ponds that I always wanted to visit.
Sorry, we just we need to move on to the ponds because we're still admiring the crocus.
Oh, what's going on? I don't understand what's going on.
What I think, George, what I think's happening is you've shared a window, and the window you've shared is your PowerPoint. So when you open a presentation, it's opening a different window on your computer which you're not sharing. So maybe if you stop sharing, start the presentation, then start sharing again, that might work.
I'll stop sharing then.
Have you start the presentation on your computer in start slideshow mode, and then if you can go back to, without closing that presentation, you can go back to Zoom and start sharing again and see if that works.
I've gone back to the first frame. Can you see that?
No, you have to start sharing again.
I'm going to stop PowerPoint and start it again.
Okay.
Right, I've completely stopped. It's just loading. Right, I'm going to share screen.
Yeah.
Okay, there we go.
Okay, this looks more promising. Okay, try starting your presentation again. Yeah, that's working now. We should now see what you're seeing.
Right. Oh, how bizarre. So what was the cause of that then?
I think what you did was when you started sharing, you said, instead of saying you can either share the entire of your desktop or you can share a window.
Oh, right, okay.
And I think you selected share window the first time. Anyway, let's move on. We have a technical debrief after. We can see it now.
So we're back on Woking Golf Course.
Yeah, perfect.
This is Pond Water Crowfoot. And I've been trying to get to these ponds for a long time, and they were good. One of the things that was also there was Marsh St John's wort, Hypericum elodes, which I didn't find the first time, but I was able to go back and find it. And there's pond water crowfoot, again, Ranunculus peltatus. The leaves of water crowfoots are usually quite distinctive between the species. Doesn't help you with hybrids, of course, but they're a good guide to what you're looking at. Right, in a wood near Outwood, in a cold March day last year, came across a nice stand of the proper wild narcissuses. They're fertile. You can see small plants scattered around, isolated clumps. They become established, and they have pale tepals, much paler than the corona, and quite short. It's nice to see them. In a wood not far from here near Chertsey, I came across a patch about 10 meters across of Narcissus telemonius plenus. It's a cultivar that was brought here from Italy in about 1620, and it's very popular. It's a double form. It looks like that. There was a lot of it, but it's not fertile, so you don't get isolated clumps of it. It just spreads vegetatively from a common centre. And there it is again. I always think it's a bit ugly actually, but I don't like doubles very much. Right, in the same wood, early in the year, I saw some leaves, and I thought, oh, that looks like Moschatel. I'll go back and confirm that. So I went back, and it wasn't Moschatel. It was Corydallis solida, bird in a bush. Now, why it's called that, I have no idea. The individual flowers look like that, just like the other corydalises, a bit like the yellow corydallis you get on walls in London, a different colour. Right, early purple orchids. You get stands of them in a wood. This was in May, and this is again a small part of it, and I thought it looked superb. This is the early purple. They usually have more purple, sort of look like hairy purple spots on the labellum than this one does, but there's an early purple one. I presume this was a pasty, an early pasty orchid. And this is an early anemic orchid, always all part of the same colony. But they are very variable. Right, square bashing near Chobham. I was crossing I thought I'd have a look at the central reservation, so I came over here. What you have to look at is this purple spot there, and it's green-winged orchid, Anacamptis morio. It's decreasing in Surrey, still in a few churchyards, but not very many of them. So I was really pleased to see it on this central reservation. It's not going to get herbicided. It gets mown roughly every now and then by the council, but that's not going to harm the orchid. So it stands a good chance of surviving and, I hope, spreading. And people don't trample on it. I was the only person I'd ever seen there. Walking down the lane near Shear, also in Surrey, Caroline Bateman and I were out, and we came across this rose, soft downy rose. I didn't recognise it, so I sent it to Roger Maskew, and he named it for me. And I thought, that's really good. He said it was probably introduced. I thought, no, I hope not. I hope it's self-seeded. Anyway, I didn't take a picture of it, but in the winter, I happened to go down the same lane. Around the base of it were one of those plastic tubes they put around plants to stop them being eaten. So I was quite disappointed, but at least I know what Rosa mollis looks like now. And the sepals are persistent, and they hang on until the hips are rotted away. Whereas in a lot of the other roses, they fall off either before the hips ripen or as the hips ripen. Right, in the wood, they've done some woodland clearing. This was down near Cold Harbour. And again, this is only a small part of the patch, thousands of foxgloves. I always like to see them, especially close up. I like their spotty hairiness. Right, pot in my back garden. You know, this is common spotted orchid. Grew spontaneously. How the seeds got there, I don't know. But there are some on the bank in a garden about 300 or 400 yards away from here. But that's not what I was going to show you. You're supposed to be looking at this grotty, weedy little thing with pods spread all over the place. And it's New Zealand bittercress, Cardamine corymbosa. It is becoming more widespread, but always in rural places, scruffy little places. There's another one called Cardamine occulta, which I believe has only so far been found in municipal containers in London's southwest London streets. I have yet to see that. But it's hard to get rid of, and it springs up in all my pots, but it's not a problem because it's so small. Right, I had a binge on hawkweeds last year because there's a big gap in my knowledge, so I thought I'd try it. This is Longcross Churchyard, and it's Heraceum grandidens. I put in, and in the inset are the basal leaves, quite broad leaves, and with fairly prominent teeth. In a road near Purford, not far from here, Heraceum scototictum. It has speckled leaves. You can't see very clearly here, but again, there was a mass of it. It's a garden escape, but it looked very attractive. It's growing under pines. I went down to the New Forest to find, with Eric Clement, to find Hypericum xylosteiifolium. we didn't find it. We found something that we thought might be it, but it wasn't. It was just a different one. But looking at the mapmate distribution for it in Surrey, I saw there was a site down in southwest Surrey, not far from Cranley. So I went down to have a look, and that's it. It's hard to put your finger on what makes it different from other hypericums. It's shrubby, it's a garden escape, and all the parts are just a bit smaller. It's got a sort of a more petite look about it. And those are the flowers. It has 3 styles. Right, to get away from plants for a while, the Surrey Botanical Society had a meeting at West Swarsley Place last year, and on a poplar, we saw this, a poplar hawkmoth caterpillar. Always nice to see. I'd never seen one before, but there are the poplar leaves just to prove it. In the garden of someone I know, she has a fuchsia, and every now and then on it, she gets these caterpillars, the elephant hawkmoth caterpillars. Not there every year, but very distinctive. And when predators come near, they look at them and frighten them off. At West Swarsley Place, on the wall, there's an elephant hawkmoth. Again, I haven't seen one of those for years, so I was very pleased to see it. This one's getting a bit tatty. Walking up a ditch, look at ferns. A blackbird flew out from under my feet, and I thought, I know what that is. And there it is. There's its nest. Again, I haven't seen a blackbird's nest since I was a child. Probably because I haven't been looking for them in the way I did then. Right, back to crocuses, back to spring. I'm getting near the end now. This is in a cemetery, in Sen Cemetery, Crocus Chrysanthus, a yellow crocus with bronzy stripes on the outside of the tepals. And this was in Mitchett Churchyard. This is Crocus flavus, much smaller, golden, with no markings on the outside. And I presume these were all planted and sort of semi-naturalized or semi-established, but not really wild. Not like the Crocus Thomasinianus that we saw earlier on. This is a hybrid. Brian Matthew identified all these for me because I was very puzzled by all of it, but he is very helpful. You can send him photographs and he explains why things are what they are. This is a hybrid between Crocus biflorus and Crocus chrysanthus. And the thing about, I think a lot of cultivars are between those two parents. And he pointed out that a distinguishing feature of that combination is that at the base of the anthers, there's a little dark spot. And there is an outtake of that bit there. He says they're not always there, but if they are, it's a good indication of the species. Right, into the autumn. This is Crocus speciosus, Biebersline's crocus. Now, because you see a crocus flowering in the autumn, it doesn't mean it's an autumn crocus. Autumn crocus is Crocus Nudiflorus, which I've never seen. I believe it's rhizomatous, and I believe that there are no or very much paler stripes on the outside of the tepals. This is fairly frequent. It was on the verge near here when we moved in about 27 years ago, and it's come up every year since then. It hasn't really increased, but neither has it disappeared. Why anybody would plant it on the verge, I don't know, but presumably somebody did. And I think that's the last one. Yes, thank you.
Thanks very much, George. Do you want to stop sharing your screen now?
Yeah, there we are.
Lovely, thank you very much. So again, a really interesting presentation. You were obviously really exploring the crocuses this year, or over the last year. You've obviously finding out more about those along with your hawkweeds and so on.
The crocus season is just coming up, so I shall be
Yeah.
out there looking around.
Lovely. I think my favourite has to be the Anacanthus morio on the Central Reservation. That's just that was just a fantastic find, and it kind of got real potential for it to kind of establish itself and to spread. So yeah, fantastic. Thank you very much. I'm going to just ask Anka, do you want to show your slides? We've just about got time if you want to.
Yeah, I could do. I could go through some of them very, very quickly.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, thank
all
you.
right,
So we'll finish off with that.
I'd like to see them. I think it'd be really good.
Be interesting, be a little bit different.
Yeah.
So let's see. Sorry, I've got too much. Forget how to do this. Okay, right. Okay, so this was kind of done very, very last minute, but I wanted to show something a little bit different. So this is botanical, but it is microscopic, very, very, very tiny, tiny cells, basically, of plants. And this line here, just to give you an idea, is 10 micrometers or 10 microns. So it is very tiny. This is at 400 times down a microscope. So these are actually phytoliths that I'm going to show you. And phytoliths are basically silica. They're made up of silica. And what happens is that particular plants, mainly monocotyledons, so grasses and orchids and such like, will take up the soluble silica that is in soils and take it up throughout the plant. And then the silica will deposit across in different cells and between cells, and then it solidifies. When the plant dies, what's left are these little bits of silica. So you can see all the silica all around here. And then I come along, I grab some dirt samples, process it in a lab, whack it under a microscope, and then I start looking for phytoliths. And phytoliths, some of them you can determine to species. Most of them, if we can get down to family, we're happy. But I'm just going to show you a few examples tonight. So the first one here, and I should note that all of these actually come from the Middle East. I have yet to find any phytoliths here in the UK. So all of these are from Iraq and Qatar. So this particular one is most likely a quercus, an oak phytolith, a trichome, and it dates to a layer that is about 6,000 years old. So we have evidence of quercus, of oak in ancient Iraq, which is really interesting. This here, again, this is 10 micrometers. This is very, very blown up. It's not a particularly good picture, but this is of a plant cell that comes from date palm. So that would be Phoenix dactytifera. Now, the reason I can tell it's date palm is because of these little spikes that are poking up. And so they're quite distinctive when you look down a microscope, but they're also ridiculously small, so only about 10 micrometers across. This one, I should note, also comes from Iraq, and it's a very, very old sample, about 9,000 years ago. This is a very typical husk. It's some sort of grass. I can't tell you which grass because there aren't enough characteristics for me to determine beyond grass, but we do get a lot of these. These are multi-cells. So each one of these is a cell made up of silica. And we call these dendritics because they have these funny little patterns on the side. This, I'm not really sure what it is. It's some kind of scalloped, it probably comes from a tree or maybe a seed or something, but I have yet to determine what it's from. Again, this another sample from Iraq. And again, we're looking at 10 micrometers across. So it's very, very tiny. It may well be a fragment of something bigger. And here, do you remember that husk that I just showed you, the multi-cell husk I showed you earlier? This is what a single cell from a husk looks like. And again, you can see these little pointed ends, and this is why we call these dendritic. And then this is, I have no idea, quite frankly. It's unfortunately, a lot of times when you look down a microscope, you get very, very weird things. I call them I call them WTFs, and I think everybody can figure out what that means. I really have no clue. And you come across a lot of these things. So I end up just taking pictures, I draw them, and then I try to find out what they are. And many times I never do find out. But maybe one day, or maybe somebody here will know what this is, and maybe one day I'll be able to discover what that is. And that's pretty much it for today. So I'll just stop the share.
Thanks, Anka. That was an intriguing sort of finish as well. And I know you've got to, so people are already interested in that. Anka's going to do a whole talk on Phytoliths for us on the 7th of July. So do kind of have a look at that in the list of events and book for that. But that was fascinating. We went from, looking at things on a very different sort of scale. I'd love to be kind of like the dentate kind of forms that we could see. Yeah, that's great. Thank you very much.
You're
so
welcome.
we're going to finish off in a second because we've run on a little bit longer, but they were 3 excellent presentations. Thank you so much to all of the speakers and for taking the time to put those together. I think there was just 1 or 2 things in the chat, so we could just maybe pick up. Let me have a little look. Okay, yeah, somebody wanted to know the name of the very aromatic umbellifer in your presentation, John. Could you just remind us of the name?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yep, that's fine.
Yeah. Meum, M-E-U-M, Athamantikum, A-T-H-A-M-A-N-T-I-C-U-M.
Lovely, thank you very much. Yeah, that's great. So we won't have time really for any more questions, but all the kind of people that you've spoken are all members of the society. You can contact us all by just getting in touch with the Botanical Committee or come through to the virtual talk. So if there's any kind of question that's popped into your head now that you really would like to ask, just send it on to us and we'll make sure it goes to the relevant person. So before I wrap up and just tell you what's coming next for the LNHS virtual talks, I want to say thank you again to the speakers for 3 fantastic presentations. The photographs were wonderful. So people were saying, oh, I'm not very good at taking photographs, but they were really excellent. And we saw a really nice, diverse range of different kinds of plants. Some people were particularly taken with the ferns, John. So just to mention that. And I just can't imagine that sort of finding outside that the Queen Elizabeth sort of second conference centre, 7 ferns, including very interesting ones. I mean, that's just amazing, really. I found that kind of fascinating. And thank you for showing us plants from different places, very different kinds. It was really fantastic evening. So thank you. What I'm going to just say now is that you're very lucky in that there's another event for the London Natural History Society next week. So you only have to wait 1 week for our next talk. That's going to be all about brown hares. Bob Reed is going to be speaking next Thursday, the 3rd of February, about brown hares. Now, the bad news about that is, if you haven't already booked, is it is full. We've had so many people kind of interested in it that we've actually sort of filled up all the spaces. But we do have a waiting list. And so if you are interested in coming, you haven't managed to sign up yet, do join the waiting list, because I suspect we'll have some people will decide to watch it in recording rather than live. And I'll do a little circulation around to see if people are not able to attend live, that we can fill up, free up a few spaces so people can come along. So do sign up for the waiting list, but it will tell you that the event is full, because it's, obviously hares are one of the things that lots of people want to know about. So I hope you can, if you're interested in that, you can all manage to come along to that. Thank you ever so much to everybody who's come this evening. We hope you've enjoyed the evening. There's been lots of nice messages through in the chat to the speakers. So thank you once again to them. And if you'd like to unmute yourself before you go to say goodbye, you're most welcome to do that. On our website, you'll find details of all the forthcoming talks. You'll have the opportunity to join us if you haven't joined already. Thank you again for a really lovely evening, and we'll see you again very soon.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for coming.
Bye. Thank you.